basically, Destiny had a big problem with me saying that
Racism.
you were under the idea. What were we talking about? Is like buying homes.
Oh, just people have a lot of weird financial hangups but it's all good. Like, I think you were saying something like doctors can't afford to buy a house in the U.S. I'm pretty sure a doctor can afford to buy a house almost anywhere in the U.S.
No, sure. A doctor's salary, right? A doctor's so someone who makes like $150,000 a year, or like. So my problem with that was that obviously you don't have a fixed income as a sex worker, so you either have to buy a house in full or just deal with the fear of not being able to pay a mortgage for like an extended amount of time.
I mean, that's going to depend on the size you're at, right?
Sure, someone like Amaranth.
No, not somebody like Amaranth. If you,
I don't even think I can.
If you are making, this is going to be my guess, and I'm almost positive I'm correct. If you're making over $5,000 a month off of some alternative business like OnlyFans or something, you can probably bank on your income being within like a certain range, like every month. It's probably about there. Like,
sure, but I think that most women probably not age out of it, but sort of be like, I don't want to do this anymore, and then you're like, oh fuck, but I still have this mortgage. Like, most women don't want to stay in sex work.
Sure, that's the thing. That, I mean, you have to transition to something else. But I mean, the same can be said for a lot of entertainment related work. I think that one thing that people miss for the OnlyFans stuff is that a lot of entertainment related work is going to be pretty similar. Like, a lot of the complaints that you make about how like, oh well, you're not developing other skills, you're not going to school, that it's unreliable, like that all applies to streaming too.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Good. It's a good position.
But I don't think that monetizes like women's oppression.
What does it mean to monetize somebody's oppression?
So like if I'm using the system that I hate to give myself money, like the system that oppresses me, that sees me as just a sexual object without worth the second I turn 30, and I'm like taking advantage of that system and hacking capitalism, that's like it might seem like a positive for me in the moment, but that's like a net negative for society as a whole, because I'm being complacent. It's going to happen to my daughter if I'm doing that, and it's going to happen to her daughter if she does it.
Okay, let's what are we talking about on this panel tonight? Do we want to dig into this?
Yeah, Destiny said she belongs to the streets. That's
absolutely. No, so the question is so you're talking about using a system of oppression. Do you think that there's, well, talk to me about what you mean by that before I start asking a bunch of questions. Here's like the general, this is like a general train of thought. This is where I'm going in this conversation, okay? I'm just going to give you a rough roadmap so that you can see I'm not trying to head you off. So I'm going to ask you, what do you mean when you say like, is something oppressive to women? And then is there any way that a woman could navigate such system without it being oppressive? Or is a woman enacting some form of like control over her body always going to be reinforcing that oppression? So like, if you're saying that like a lot of men objectify women, like they jerk off to them, is it possible that a woman could ever like act in a way that capitalizes on men's desires like that, that's like not empowering, but it's like it's allowing her to work and make money or whatever? Or is that always going to be necessarily a negative thing? That's kind of where I'm headed.
So I think that women, and I'm like a gender abolitionist. I believe in like equality between the sexes. And clearly we look at men, and men can't do shit like this. I mean, they can, but it's not widespread.
Well,
and
men have other ways that they
but like, and why is that? So why is it? So why don't men do this as often as women do?
Well, I think men have there's another side of like the patriarchy that men participate in, and that's violence, right? So
exactly.
Yeah. So for women, it might be sex work. For men, it might be, the CTE that you endure playing football, or it might be the brain trauma injuries that you get, doing boxing or whatever, right?
Or the military.
Or military could be another example. Yeah. So, but then the question becomes like, can you ever consent to doing like sports as men, or is that necessarily like the other side of the coin where you shouldn't endorse that either?
So yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but I also think that like sexual oppression is like really like this is like a big theme for women. I think that like women's value and women, like, there's this, we all are under the same sort of like, okay, once I'm 30, I'm fucking dead to the world. And this is like, men don't have that, and it's because they're not seen as like sexual objects of conquest. Like there are just certain things that are like we treat men and women differently because.
Okay, so since if you're gonna break up a few topics, I'm gonna bounce around these straight just so that I'm hitting everything. So the first thing you mentioned is like sexual oppression. So I agree that there are forms of sexual oppression, But the question becomes, is there any way to not be sexually oppressed while still capitalizing on her sexuality, right? Like a woman
right now,
who decides
no.
to, well, hold on, so like a woman that decides to sell nude pictures of herself, but she chooses when she wants to do it, how she wants to do it, she collects all the money from it. Would that be considered sexual oppression? Is the first one. The second one has to do, you talk about women's value, like women feel like they hit the wall at 30. Sure, I mean, we can argue that there are parts of society that reinforce that, but men also feel like they're worthless at 20, right? That's kind of like two sides of the same coin, to where men are valued for like financial stability, ability to provide, advancing in their career, things that you're going to have in your 30s, 40s as a guy, you don't necessarily have in your 20s. And then women sometimes tend to be valued just for their appearance. That sucks and it's shitty. I think we should push to change that, but I understand that some people view that as that right now. And then you say that men don't have to deal with that. Again, they do. It's just on the other end of the coin. It's just the violence part.
No, but no, I think it's the unique heinousness of like a sexual. So I think that also this turns into like violence against women. So like porn is not just like, if porn was just photos of like a naked body, or whoever said that earlier, like a nude body, and it's like very, or like a painting of a nude body, obviously that's different. But this is something that like escalates. So like a nude photo can turn into like, I mean, yesterday I went on Pornhub and I was seeing how many clicks it got me, or how many clicks it took me to get to like degradation or like kink porn, like BDSM porn. And it took like literally maybe 5 clicks.
Sure,
so this is something that the algorithm is also...
Yeah, but just as a real quick on this, so then the problem isn't intrinsically with porn. The problem is
I don't think that the problem is intrinsically with porn.
Sure. But I'm just saying that like what you're describing right now is this sort of hedonistic treadmill that applies to a lot of things. It could apply to something as simple as food. We probably overenjoy that in the United States. It could apply to video games. There's a lot of people listening to this right now that probably play more than 8 hours of League of Legends or something a day. These things are bad, but it doesn't make video games bad, and it doesn't make food bad. It just means that sometimes we have kind of an irresponsible enjoyment of them. I think pornography can probably fall under that.
I agree with you, but I also think that there's like and also like I think that you are failing to acknowledge that there is like an aspect of like the woman, and I don't know if you ever will, because you're a man, and I'm not saying that in like a you're a man, you don't understand type of way, but it's the same way that like you can never fully grasp the experience of a black man. I think it's really hard for you to fully grasp the experience of a woman.
That's
like,
great, but I think that it's also really hard for women sometimes to fully grasp the experience of being men, so we're going to do our best.
Whoa, don't drag blacks into this.
What?
No, I'm not saying that I'm a gender abolitionist. I think that there are things that I'm a feminist, and also I'm
well, hold on.
Egalitarian.
You can't be a feminist and you can't be all of these things at once, right? Gender abolitionist.
Yes, you can.
Gender abolitionist doesn't just mean equality between the genders. It means just erasing like the differences between the two.
No, I think that we can. I know I'm not saying that they're the same thing. I'm saying both.
But gender abolitionism is a whole other thing. We won't worry about that right now.
I think that we should, but whatever.
Do you think that there are always going to be some like differences biologically between men and women?
Of course, but that's sex. It's not gender roles.
No, but gender roles probably to some extent like are emergent from our sexual roles as well, right? It's not an accident that men tend to be more violent than women, or men tend to do combat sports more than women, right? Even though that's not like, it's not quote unquote biological that men are boxers, it probably stems from the biological fact that men tend to be, stronger and taller. And that probably isn't going to change no matter how much we advocate for it. So there's going to be certain gender roles that we have that are kind of like emergent properties of these underlying biological properties that are a little bit undeniable.
Sure, I'm mostly talking about like the harmful gender roles that are like that like create like mental health issues.
Sure, harmful gender roles are things we get rid of, but not because they're gender roles, just because they're harmful behaviors in society. We should get rid of all of those things. Yeah. So like addressing like issues related to like toxic patriarchal ideas, I think are good. So that might be the unfair roles that are forced upon women who would choose to do otherwise. It might be the unfair expectations that are placed upon men who would be healthier if those weren't there otherwise, right? So here's something I'm trying to understand. If a woman chooses to take pictures of herself, sell them online, and there are men that choose to buy those things because they enjoy it, where is the oppression in that interaction or exchange?
The oppression is that you are not then. I think that there is dehumanization in that. I think that when you add money to something, you, especially like a body, you like dehumanize it. The same way that when we watch on the TV, the same way people think that they can comment a bunch of fucking hate mail under like a famous actor's post is tenfold when you're also adding sex, because obviously people are very anti-sex in the world that we live in. But I think that like you can dehumanize someone you see in a fucking commercial. Like we don't realize that the people in the commercials are fucking people, right? We're just like, oh, this commercial's so annoying. I wish that Hulu would skip this. or when people don't watch ads, right? Because they're like, I don't need to watch these fucking ads, but that's like the way that you make money. Like, I think that there are little things that like prove that we dehumanize media. And so when you're dehumanizing women and you're seeing them, but also you're taking away human, and then you're pushing up sexual object, that is like a harm.
So I think that we can have on its own a conversation about dehumanization, but I think that's just kind of like an unavoidable aspect of humanity that has to do with like the locality of a thing. When people are close to us, when we interact with them, like we see them as human, the farther away from us they are, the less human we tend to see them. So the person that's talking shit on Twitter, it's very easy to blow them up and tell them to kill themselves and attack themselves. Our siblings, much harder so, right? I think that's, or, you know, the people we play games with, we might be able to shit on them more rather than playing games next to our friends. Probably not. It's unfortunate. We shouldn't do that, but I don't think it's unique to sex work, and I think that that's always going to be like a thing that people that work have to deal with.
It's unique to sex work and like in-person sex work. So like in-person sex work, I think
we're not talking. That's a totally different thing. We're not at that yet. We're just talking about like OnlyFans right now.
Okay, so with OnlyFans also, I think that access to like vast porn also, and like any flavor of porn also like undeniably does something to like the human psyche. I mean, this is like hard to study because it's hard to study shit like this in general because it's more of like a social contagion thing and everything's gonna, you know, hit different
points. It's not even hard to study. I'm pretty sure there's been at least one big study that shows that repeated porn hits, I think, impacts like your
basically what it says, that study says that they can like guess, but there's nothing that like we can't quantify it, right? There's not like that's percentages.
But I mean, like we can probably both agree that there's a harm that's incurred by somebody getting more and more obsessed with pornography, right?
Yeah. So these people who are obsessed with pornography.
Yeah. The thing I was saying before that's important is that like we can overindulge in any of the niceties or easy things provided by society. It could be video games, could be sugar, it could be.
Yeah. So I'm not moralizing around sex work. I'm making like a moral argument. I think that someone can have sex with 200 people and it's fine. But I'm saying that so there's a bunch of things mixed together, which makes this like especially heinous for women. Well, also for men. I want to acknowledge also for men, but especially heinous for women in the way that like this is something like for one thing, we're being confined into this only value is sexual accessibility, and then also there's this other thing on top of that is you know, the way that we have so much access to porn and the way that you're just seeing all these faces all day, all these vaginas all day. And it's like the top 5% most beautiful vaginas, right? Like that's an unrealistic expectation. And then, you know, another thing that is the violence aspect and the escalation of porn and how that escalation translates into the real world. Like I was talking to Brittany about earlier, being that like, obviously because, you know, 60% or 50 to 60% of men find themselves escalating porn. And then, you know, like I said, the algorithm favors violent porn, and most of sex is like degradation or violence against women. So much so now that this is desensitizing us because we start watching it at like 11.
Okay, wait. So let's just a couple things. First of all, there's no way that over 51% of porn is like violence against women. I think that those categories.
No, it's 40% of porn that is violence against women.
When you say violence against women, what does that mean?
So this is like facial abuse. This is like rape fantasy. This is like, you know, power dynamic. This is like incest.
Okay, power dynamic and incest are way different than like hardcore, like smacking or slapping or hitting or pain.
No, sure.
Also, most rape fantasies come from women as well. That's so
not relevant, but still.
Well, I would argue that that's not because it's not ontologically true that women want to be raped. It is just also like a desensitized to that sort of behavior, which I think is also harmful because now we have men that think that women want to be raped.
So I think, so real quick, okay, so I'm going to take a step back and then tell me if I'm like seeing part of the picture here. Okay. So we exist in a society that tends to value women for certain things. That's kind of shitty. One of those things we value women for is the way that they look or the sexual value that we can extract from them, willing or otherwise. When women participate in a system of pornography where they're doing a couple things. One, they're reinforcing that idea that this is how women are meant to be consumed. And two, they're participating in an industry where people are going to start consuming it and consume more and more and more and more and more and get worse. So not only are they kind of reinforcing like the bad social norms, they're making them even worse by participating in that system. Do you think that's fair?
I think they're complacent in it. I don't know if they are making it worse. I think that it is getting worse.
Sure.
But
okay.
yeah.
So let's assume all of that is true. I feel like this can be true for a lot of different industries, but I think that the issue is how do we fix that? Or what are the prescriptions that we're making for society? Like, what do we need to change with the way that we act? I think that if people want to participate in certain forms of these systems, especially in ways that aren't directly abusive or harmful to them, you can argue there's an indirect harm by being complacent. But by telling these people, well, these systems are bad and we need to change them, therefore you can't even participate positively in them, I feel like that's a tall order to place on somebody where they're not allowed to do that. Like if we were to argue that like, you know, toxic masculinity is a thing and there are ways to reinforce this, therefore boxers are now immoral, or UFC or MMA guys, all that is immoral and you guys should quit because you're furthering that. I feel like we can take a step back and say, okay,
well, it's not about morals.
Well, it is about morals. We can take a step back.
No, it's not. It's about like a net negative or positive to society and the people it's harming.
Yeah, but when we say harm or negative or positive to society, we're talking about ethics, right? These are moral conversations, right?
I think that morality and ethics are a little different, but sure, if we're using them as the same.
Sure, I would say morality and ethics are the exact same thing, is what I would say. But you wouldn't tell like every boxer, every UFC fighter, MMA fighter, like you guys need to quit. You're all part of the problem for toxic masculinity. I think we try to work on the other end to kind of like alleviate problems in society or fix expectations or whatever, while recognizing that there could be a future where everybody's perfectly equal, but women still like do sex work or whatever. They still sell OnlyFans, right?
Yeah, I think that can totally be true. And the problem is not porn.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the unregulation of porn. Like I said, I think that there can be things like we've been trying to do porn, and we've been drawing porn for like centuries. I even think that we should go back to like a Playboy-esque thing where it's like, you know, still images and stuff, and you can like buy, and those women get money, and it's like, you know, they're under a sort of like sort of like a union, and where they're being taken care of. But I think that the way that it stands today with just like porn is like, it's out of control. It's like the amount of porn that's the problem.
Yeah,
I
understand. I'll just repeat again.
And I
don't think this is anything to do with porn. I think it has everything to do with societally. We just we're realizing as we enter this kind of new age that we have infinite like somebody in my chat used a really good word for this, anachronism, evolutionary something, but basically we can trigger our reward systems as humans better than we ever could in the history of all of mankind. And like I would argue that here's something that I would say that like Reddit and Twitter are more destructive for society than porn, just because I didn't realize this until maybe like 6 months ago.
They have porn on Twitter.
What?
They have porn.
No, I'm not talking about porn on Twitter. I'm talking about people that will literally get on their phones and browse Reddit or TikTok for like 8 hours.
looking for porn.
No, not looking for porn. Looking for dopamine hits. Looking for funny 30-second memes from one to the next, 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 to the next. And people do that 8 hours a day, 30 days a month, 365 days a year. Like literally, it's unreal how much screen time people are on. And I would argue things like this are even worse than our engagement with porn. So I think we have problems in society around porn, but it's not because of porn. We're just really bad at triggering these dopamine responses in everything we engage in. And I think that's what we need to focus on.
I would agree with you on that, but I think that the way that we fix that is by regulating and you know, doubling down on like fixing things like porn. Like I think we make little wins, right? Like
sure,
I don't think that we're just like, fuck it, we just have to deal with it.
I think that our issues are, and this is, I'm always critical of Nick or communists or whatever when they talk about like, you know, in society we've got all these bad things happening and people don't know what they're doing and everybody's lost, blah blah blah. People want to like change, or they want to blame like a loss of morality or religion or whatever bullshit, you know, whatever your pet project happens to be, you know, also explains all of society's problems. I think the real issue is we have a really difficult time as humans engaging responsibly with technology that can give us more pleasure today than ever in all of human history. And I agree with you. Yeah, we don't have the ability to engage responsibly with it right now. And just giving everybody unfettered access to it doesn't seem to be an effective way of like having a society function.
I would agree with you on all those things, and I don't think that makes my my worries about sex any less serious. And also, you know, I think that advocates that are like, you know, saying things like we have like TikTok is ruining brains. I think that there can totally be advocates and they can be right about all those things. it's not that I'm negating all those things. It's not that I don't think that those things don't exist. I think I'm specifically focusing on this is because I was a victim of this. So I don't think that this is like the only thing, like very unique in that this is the only thing, but also I have been like a victim of this, so it's on the top of my brain. You know what I mean?
That's fair.
But I think there are obviously bigger problems with society, but I think that, you know, we can't as humans do everything all at once, so we need certain people to focus on certain things, and so we can all change all of these things, right?
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I just don't like it when like the victims of said system kind of are like the ones that end up like getting most of the criticism is kind of my irritation. So like if we really wanted to criticize like the porn industry or like the OnlyFans models and shit, then truly like I think you kind of have to look at like, well, you know, where's the money coming from? And that's all the men that partake in it, you know? It feels shitty to get like target the women that are arguably victims of the system, if we're going to say anything else, versus like the men that all participate in it.
Sure, but like I said, women can also become complacent. I think that there's personal responsibility. I don't think we should infantilize women. I think that especially if we give women the information, being like, you know, this is like a net negative, they can probably make a choice for themselves if they're given the information. And there's only so much we can tell men when women are still giving it. So you can be like, don't look at porn bad, but the porn still exists. Like in our utopian pipe dream, we can tell men not to rape and do things, but they're still gonna fucking do it. So even your stealthing argument, I brought this up earlier, like your stealthing argument that we tell women that they have some sort of responsibility in this, even though it's not most of it, right? Mm-hmm. They still have some sort of responsibility in that they can be complacent by like not setting boundaries. And so to avoid that, we say, okay, do not engage in this anymore.
Yeah, the only difference though is that here you're talking about a person basically incurring kind of a personal harm for societal hypothetical good. Like you're telling a woman who otherwise maybe could make a lot of money doing this, no, you're not allowed to do that because it might be hurting society, which I think is kind of a tall order.
I think it's a cost risk thing also, because I think that, you know, if the risk was much less and the cost was great, if you can like do what I do, make the money I can, but then also stay like completely anonymous, great for that person personally. I still think that obviously there's underpinnings to that are like patriarchal and sexual objectification of women, but I also think that the sex worker is safer that way because of the way that society treats sex workers.
Potentially, although that's changed a bit, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely, it definitely has changed.